I want to start off by talking a little bit about my team, the Cincinnati Bengals, the degenerates of the NFL when it comes to their front office. Just absolute idiots when it comes to getting contracts done in a smooth way. But it looks like there might be some...
Are you an idiot if you're just broke?
I don't know. I feel like there's more going on than just like a lack of money. Because yesterday, a report came out that Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals have resumed talks and conversations about their contracts. And I actually have some cautious optimism related to this report, just because this seems to be playing out exactly like what happened with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, where they couldn't come to an agreement. There was all of this animosity between both parties, and then now conversations have resumed. And I would imagine conversations would only be resuming under the assumption that one of the parties has made some sort of concession. And the idea or the hope is that it's the Bengals. I don't see a world where Trey Hendrickson decided to take less money. And so I think, finally these Bengals organizations have come to their senses, hopefully, about what Trey Hendrickson is worth and what they're willing to pay him for, which is huge news, because without Trey Hendrickson, I would doubt we're even a playoff team.
There's a little bit of, I feel like in the short term, yes, you gotta have Trey Hendrickson, or else the season is almost doomed from the start. It would feel like. The problem is that the Bengals, they don't do it for the same reasons whatsoever, and they don't have the same outcomes, meaning that it's worse, but they operate weirdly exactly like how Jerry Jones runs the Cowboys. The problem is that at the end of the day, Jerry Jones at the Dallas Cowboys are the biggest sports franchise in the entire world. So they have the capital to be able to pay their players, whereas the Bengals have to be more stingy, and yet they put themselves in situations where by delaying they overpay. And so to be clear, it's almost like it's too late to go a different direction. At this point, you have to pay Trey Hendrickson.
100%. Well, and the issue is that because of all of these just failures, to be frank, when it comes to these contract situations, you immediately get rid of all the leverage that you have in terms of trade talks.
Yeah.
And so when you look at a player like Trey Hendrickson, he's worth a certain amount of money, but he's not worth what the Bengals would be willing to trade him for. And so that being a first round pick. And so a lot of these teams were like, well, why, if there's already this animosity, if there's already this question mark related to, are you going to sign him? Are you going to extend him? Then we'll just wait the year.
Yeah.
Why would we trade for a first round pick now? They're willing to pay him the money he's asking for, but because of that stinginess by the Bengals, they take away all their leverage to get what they could.
There's another thing too, where, because the language around, especially like the T. Higgins thing as an extension of the Jamar Chase extension, is sort of the tag and the marketing of it has been, well, we take care of our guys. That's the messaging that the Bengals are putting out. The problem is that when it takes you, when it takes a player to engage in a proxy battle with their agent and the front office in order to get paid, the Bengals don't seem like a place where it's like, oh, we protect our guys, we take care of our guys, and yet they still end up giving them the money. So it's this weird thing where it's the worst of both worlds, where you end up paying the most that you possibly can, and the players don't really walk away from it that happy relatively to like, you're still getting generational wealth, but there's a lot smoother contract and extension processes from basically probably 28 of the other 31 NFL teams.
Yeah, and the thing is like, there's definitely animosity between Trey Hendrickson and the front office. He even came out and said, like, this is personal because you told me this is what I'm worth. You told me this is what the extension would be, and you've completely failed when it comes to delivering on that promise. And so, again, It really just comes down to I don't think that this, if they do eventually get a deal done, that it's going to affect Trey Hendrickson's play. I don't think that's the type of player he is. In my mind, the biggest harm that comes from this is just a lack of flexibility in terms of the management of your assets. And then B, I just don't think a lot of players are going to want to sign with the Bengals. I think it's as simple as that, where it's like, you now have this reputation where you don't put your players first. You don't extend them to friendly contracts. And like, again, there's also the Shamar Stewart of it all. That's completely muddying the waters when it comes to that contract. And so they're just failing on all fronts, even if they sign these players.
Another thing too is that the difference in, and to be the vibes doctor whatsoever, because I think, you know, that is an important thing. It's a intangible, but this isn't like a Chris Jones situation for the Chiefs a couple seasons ago where, you know, he ended up sitting out and holding out the first game of the season because the Chiefs, or any successful NFL team, if you're coming off of a deep playoff run, or obviously if you're in the levels of a dynasty, you almost have that franchise cachet of, this is a team that you want to play for. The Bengals, I get it, they have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, but they've missed the playoffs more than they've made them under Joe Burrow. I get that they made the Super Bowl, and we know at least we think we know what the ceiling of a Joe Burrow-led team is, which is winning a Super Bowl, but you haven't reached that apex yet, which means that as a franchise, you have a lot less cachet of like, look, sign with us, we're going to take you to the promised land. It's more so that the player has the leverage of, if you don't sign me, you have no chance.
Especially with Trey Hendrickson, right?
Yeah.
Like, because even with the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, specifically the T. Higgins conversations, there's always that, well, you're just the wide receiver number 2. And, you know, I kind of view it more as like 1A, 1B, but still, like, there's always there's this other guy
and
that
that is where,
you.
And we've had this conversation before, not on this podcast. I disagree with you on the T. Higgins situation. I'm on the same page as the Jamar Chase and the Trey Hendrickson. Those are guys you have to pay. I disagree with the paying 2 wide receivers, and obviously T. Higgins didn't get anywhere near Jamar Chase, but you can't pay a wide receiver 1 top dollar and then a wide receiver 2 top dollar for a wide receiver 2. I don't think that, I think in the short term it works, but we're talking about a window here of 2 seasons and one of those has already passed.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we can have that conversation for another day, because I do completely disagree with you in terms of the financial situation. But I'll tell you, when it comes to Trey Hendrickson, I just think that you as an organization have to understand that he is your defense, that there are a lot of things that were done in order to elevate your defense in terms of coaching, in terms of the draft picks, in terms of really just all of the changes that were made to that front. All of that completely goes out the window without Trey Hendrickson. And that's, I think, what people have to, that's what they have to understand. And that's why they don't have any leverage when it comes to these conversations and these contracts.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is that it's almost as if, and I'm using this language of, without Trey Hendrickson, you have no shot, which is in a sense true, but it's also the level of, it almost kills the momentum that you have defensively, because you feel like we've brought in Al Golden, we've moved on from Lou Anarumo at the defensive coordinator. And so we have this feeling that the secondary is finally potentially going to be improved. And we've had the Lou Anarumo discussion before, but then you wipe out all that momentum by eradicating the pass rush. Because yes, you can't, even Trey Hendrickson couldn't prevent the Bengals from going 9-8 last season, even though he had a fantastic season. But now the idea is, if we get a Trey Hendrickson back again, and we have improvement in the secondary, we're looking at a legitimate threat to win the AFC North and to make a playoff run.
And what you have to realize, and this is what I don't think is talked about enough, is that last year the Bengals had a losing record when they scored 33 points. Like, they tied the record for the most amount of losses to when you score that many points. We're not talking about them needing this generational defense.
Is Joe Burrow the problem?
Exactly. No, it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, literally, they just have to be, if we can get the 15th best defense in the league, we're talking about a 13-win team. That's the number.
Really funny
when you look at that, that's the number. When you look at the 13 or the season that Joe Burrow had and look at those stats, if you put in a statistically average defense in the NFL, it is a 13-win team.
Yeah. It is really awesome how some media members, they pick the guy to hate on and to watch them stick with it. And you can infer the people that I'm talking about when it comes to Joe Burrow. Because some guys get it right. They pick a guy who they don't think is going to pan out and isn't elite, and then they aren't. But then you've got, man, to pretend like Joe Burrow's the issue.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, it really threads or comes back to the rookie season and comparing that to, you know, Joe Burrow got hurt. He was a first overall pick. Justin Herbert had this crazy season, and people kind of stuck their claim in the Justin Herbert, I guess, discuss pack take. And so they were like, Justin Herbert is better than Joe Burrow. And now they're at a situation where it's like, yeah, just Joe Burrow's just totally overrated. And it's like, you're just holding on to that rookie season.
Well, speaking of AFC North quarterbacks, a little, we're going to shift to a slightly different level of talent, perhaps. Aaron Rodgers is officially a Pittsburgh Steeler. We knew it was happening. We knew it was coming. And I don't even want to get into the entire Aaron Rodgers. Okay, I will get into one thing. I do think him coming back, being married, is such an Aaron Rodgers move because and I'm not saying this is why he got married. I'm sure he found a lovely woman to get married to. We have no clue who she is. It feels like the perfect defense mechanism for, like, Aaron, why did you wait so long? Why? He was like, I'm getting married. Wow, the media doesn't care about my love life, apparently. It's like, well, you know, you probably shouldn't have held out this long, but now he's back, and apparently the vibes are high in Pittsburgh. The problem is that that's the story, and I know this is only his second time moving on, you know, but it feels like so similar to the Jets situation where, because all of his teammates love him. There's not 98% of Aaron Rodgers' teammates across the entirety of his career have nothing to say and speak nothing but glowingly about him. So it isn't that. It's not that he's some locker room poison in terms of individual football players on the same team as him disliking him. The problem is the cumulative Aaron Rodgers bubble that he creates. But enough about the off-the-field stuff. I mean, what's the ceiling for this team?
That's exactly the problem. Like, the Steelers, when they're looking at, you know, like, real improvements, and we even talked about this whenever we graded their offseason, is that they're a team that has a floor. It's 9 wins. Now, what are you going to do about their ceiling? And the reason why we graded them so low is because they didn't do anything. And this Aaron Rodgers pickup doesn't do anything in terms of elevating their ceiling. Like, you wouldn't pick them against some of the top dogs in the AFC now.
No, and it's almost
so it's like, it's
a cliche take at this point, because every year there's that handful of people who say this is the year. To be clear, you know, I promise, you'll have to believe me, I have not been one of the people who has, over the last 4 years, said this is the year that Tomlin definitively has a losing record. this is the first year where I'm potentially thinking that that is on the table. So I wouldn't even go so far as to say, well, the floor is 9 wins. I'd say the floor is probably closer to 7, and the ceiling is 10 wins. And
It's the same as the floor. Like, like it's just.
And the problem is that, I mean, here's the problem in the large term when we have the Aaron Rodgers Pittsburgh Steelers discussion. What else did you want them to do? Because I don't want to ignore that fact.
Yeah,
sometimes quarterback free agency and movement discussion is all based around like the Jets bringing in Justin Fields. Obviously, there's the him leaving Pittsburgh connection, but it's like, oh, the Jets really think that they could make the playoffs with Justin Fields. It's like, no, that's not their goal. That's not, we talk about the NFL almost as if it's the exact opposite of the NBA, where if you know anything about the NBA, you basically go into the season thinking that there are 5 teams that could win the title. This year is actually an exception with the Pacers making a run at it. And sometimes we talk about the NFL like it's the opposite, where we talk ourselves into half of the league, or we have this discussion as to like 28 of the 32 NFL teams should be attempting to win the Super Bowl. That's silly. Any given Sunday goes too far sometimes. You can't automatically be like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is coming in. Well, why would they bring him in? He's been terrible for the last, 3 years of his career. And the problem is, at a certain point, I don't necessarily blame the Steelers, because it's not like they gave him some ridiculous contract. He's actually really cheap. He's getting paid less than some backups. So I really don't believe that this is something that I can kill the Steelers on. It's more so just looking at it practically to disagree with the minority of people that are inevitably going to be like, I actually think the Steelers have a shot. Aaron Rodgers. The biggest thing, the thing that people are saying now, it's my favorite injury discussion is, well, the Achilles heel is a 2-season injury. It's not until that second season that you're fully healthy. And it's just, the guy's 40 years old.
Yeah, and he's the oldest guy in the NFL.
He's less than, 2 years removed from tearing his Achilles. It's not going to go great.
It's not even about that. It's just that, like even regardless of the injury and his age, it's just like, we've seen what this quarterback can do at this point in his career. You can't tell me, like, obviously the Jets had a terrible year. If you look at the offenses, it wasn't much better. Like, it's not like he's going into this great offensive situation. At least with the Jets, I believe they had, the coordinator that he was, really familiar with. I don't see an Arthur Smith offense being able to maximize a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers. And so, again, to your point, it's not necessarily to say that the Steelers have done something bad by signing him. It's just that they're in a tough spot, because this is kind of an interesting conversation, but like, when was the last time we really had a meaningful quarterback be moved within the NFL? It's been a really long time. I think the most recent thing that I can remember is the Goff and Stafford trade. And then before that, like, Tom Brady going to the Bucs. Like,
in terms of working out, yes. I mean, obviously there's been, in terms of success stories, I suppose you're right. Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I guess. But like, I'm thinking
but
of
that's
like
different, because that's a career revival.
Yeah, that's like he went, and even like you could say Russell Wilson, but he was, again, we're talking about guys that are at the back half of their career. I'm talking about like straight up crazy available or like high end in their prime quarterback talent that's being moved.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not happening anymore. And so they are in a tough situation because of that. They have to be able to get it into the draft. Maybe, Will Howard will be able to learn a lot from Aaron Rodgers, and that's going to be kind of the biggest takeaway from this season. But I think the Steelers are who the Steelers are. They're going to win. I still think they're probably going to have a winning record just because I really do. I trust Mike Tomlin. But it's just going to be the same old Steelers. I wouldn't be surprised if they miss the playoffs because I do think the AFC got better. But yeah, it's just there's not much to talk about. It's Aaron Rodgers. We know what he is. He's shown what he is. We know who the Steelers are. This isn't a move that's going to elevate them.
The two biggest takeaways, and then we'll move on, or not takeaways, but points of note on this move, is that basically they've signed, this is a stopgap quarterback, actually.
Yeah.
It's a big name because it's Aaron Rodgers, but it's a stopgap quarterback. The problem is, on top of that, is that this is their fifth stopgap quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger. So it's not like
Kenny Pickett was like, I feel like the other guys were intentional. Kenny Pickett they drafted him early in the first round.
That's fair. Well, it's not that it's been an entirety of stopgap quarterbacks, but the problem is that they haven't gotten their guy.
Yes,
and five, I was joking, but I believe this would qualify as the third journeyman guy that they've brought in to try to be a starter for a period of time. But then you throw in the fact to where the expectations are going to overblow themselves because it's Aaron Rodgers. When the reality of the situation is, but the problem is ultimately, how many more stopgap quarterbacks can you have? This is at best a 2-year solution.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. We'll
see what happens.
Speaking of AFC North quarterbacks. This is the entirety of our news without even, planning it this way.
No.
Shedeur Sanders with the Browns. The discussion around it is just so fun because all of the word right now is that, he's looking pretty impressive at training camp. Because of the accuracy. And here's what people are saying. And I've heard multiple clips of media members talking about this where, he was accurate in college and clearly we see that this could translate to the NFL because, and I don't know if you knew this, but he was the most accurate college quarterback of all time. The problem is that his company on that list is not great. Because immediately preceding him is Colt Brennan, Colt McCoy, double Colts, Kellen Moore, Graham Harrell, Grayson McCall. I mean, you could keep going until you hit, I believe, 12th overall in all-time college quarterback accuracy is Joe Burrow. And he sticks out like a sore thumb on that list of top 20 guys. So when we're talking about this situation, accuracy is one of those traits where it's almost like as long as you aren't inaccurate, I don't really necessarily care what the ceiling of accuracy is. Because as long as you're in that like 60 to 65% range, I'm fine. I'm not drafting some guy who had a 72% college accuracy because he had that accuracy and then imagining that he's going to suddenly turn into some NFL star because guess what? That's literally never happened.
Yeah. And again, like to your point, it makes sense that he'd be having a good training camp if he, is accurate with the football. Because
you're playing that's kind of like third string guys.
Well, and also like have they even put pads on? Like they're not.
I don't know.
It's not like full
I don't
contact.
know what the Brown. Everyone does it a little differently. I don't know off the top of my head whether the Browns.
I don't think they're doing full contact yet. But like the point of that is to say, like if you're a quarterback who's essentially playing like flag football, like accuracy is probably the most important thing when you don't really have a real pass rush. Like. That makes a lot of sense.
Maybe Shedeur Sanders needs to go to the 28 Olympics. Maybe he needs to be America's flag football quarterback. Because, he's the most accurate. He's not getting hit. Why not?
Yeah. There you go. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that we said this when we talked about the Browns. I think that you hear all these extremes related to Shedeur Sanders about his ceiling and about his floor, and I expect him to be right in the middle. That's kind of where I'm at with him. I think that he's going to be a fine quarterback in the NFL.
Just on a completely random tangent off of the Olympics, I can already imagine some of the discourse around the Olympics adding flag football, and I can already imagine some of the NFL players who are going to play for our flag football team, and 15 years, 16 years down the line, you're going to have people, when they're talking about the legacy of players, being like, he won a gold medal in flag football for his, and
yeah. I mean, they do that in basketball. That's a big deal when it comes to the Basketball Hall of Fame.
But guess what? You're actually playing the sport of basketball.
That's a good point.
so that's my point, is we're gonna, I fear not everyone's gonna do it, because not everyone's gonna be this dumb, but there are gonna be some people who argue in bad faith 20 years down the line, being like, gold medalist Shedeur Sanders, did he really get a fair chance in the NFL? Like, dude, what are we talking about?
That whole conversation, I don't even know the guy's name, but just like that one guy who he kind of just got famous for, like, basically saying, like,
I'm glad we don't know his name.
Yeah. He's like, oh, it's not fair. Like, we set the standard and we brought flag football into the national media. It's like, no, like, the only reason it's getting the time of day is because of this ridiculous thing that you're saying, that you should, over like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray or Jaden Daniels, be the quarterback of the flag football
I can
team.
confidently say that Lamar Jackson has never played, if he's never played a game of flag football in his life, will be better than you, pal.
He's going to be better than everybody. He's so good at flag football.
But see, that's what I'm saying. I'm a Lamar Jackson fan, but if he is our quarterback, we don't know what it's going to be. And it will be somewhat fun to watch, but there will be like Lamar apologists 15 years from now, being like, two-time gold medalist, flag football quarterback.
Did Patrick Mahomes win gold medal?
That's the thing too. Is Mahomes already came out and was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to be playing flag football." And there's going to be some guys down the line be like, "Didn't have it in him. Didn't want to represent his country."
He didn't have it in him.
Does Patrick Mahomes hate the United States of America?
Dude, that's going to be the title of this video.